So, yeah, last week, like I was saying, we heard about the human situation and we heard about the Buddha's transcendence of that situation. So, his awakening and how he woke up to the way things really are and was able to live in harmony with the way things are, which, as we'll see in a moment, was a profound responsiveness, a deep responsiveness to life. And we heard that he presented a path that enables a transformation of our desires so that they are in harmony with existence. And what's really fundamental in this path, what's really fundamental in this process of development and transformation is the mind. So this is really, really key to the whole Buddhist project, is understanding the absolutely crucial importance of the mind. Now, when I use the word mind, I'm basically, in a way, in Buddhism, the word mind, the idea of mind is quite broad. It includes that thinking aspect, and it includes what goes on in our head, as we say. So it includes thinking and reflecting and remembering information, all the images in our brain, as it were. So it includes that, but it's also got an emotional aspect or even a volitional aspect. So it's as much about what goes on in our heart as what goes on in our head. Often the word that is translated as mind is translated as heart. The word is chitta, which you find in the original texts, and it's often translated as heart equally as well as mind. So I think we need to realize that what we're talking about is not just a sort of a trick of thought, but it's a profound transformation of our deepest longings and our deepest desires that arise, as it were, from our heart, from our absolute core. So when we talk about working with the mind or even training the mind, that's what we're working with. We're working with the sort of source of everything that we do. And according to the Buddhist tradition, the mind is the ultimate source of our happiness or unhappiness, not external conditions. External conditions will change. Sometimes they'll favor us, sometimes they won't favor us. But all the time, what goes on in our mind will be absolutely crucial in determining if we're happy or unhappy. So what we learned last week is that mindfulness is the primary agent of transformation. It's the primary way that we transform our mind. And really the simplest way of talking about what mindfulness is just doing one thing at a time. So when we do the mindfulness of breathing, we're just trying to be aware of our breathing. We're making that the focus of our attention and trying to become more and more absorbed in that process. Similarly, when we're washing our hands, we probably won't become as absorbed because we're not going to be there for as long, but we're just trying to become absorbed. We're trying to, first of all, just notice what happens, what sensations arise when we wash our hands. So when we try and become aware of, in this way, when we try and become aware of our body, we notice a few things. One of the things we might notice is that our mind is changing. So as we become aware of our body, we notice the evanescent nature of our mind. So thoughts come, thoughts go. Emotions come, emotions go. There's this constant flow of all sorts of different material through our mind. Our mind is almost like a river that's carrying, I always think of it like autumn leaves being carried down the river, and our thoughts are a little bit like that. There's this constant flow. One of the other things we notice is that when we set out to pay attention, for example, to our breath, our mind pulls in a different direction to that which it's set out on. So we're now paying attention to something other than what we started out paying attention to. So that's what happens, isn't it, when we do the mindfulness of breathing? All of a sudden we notice that we're not paying attention to our breathing anymore. Our mind has kind of pulled itself back to something that's more familiar. So the mind tends to revert to what it's done before. This is a constant habit, a force even of habit. It tends to run along similar grooves. So you find this if you're, I was over with a friend of mine recently in Clare, and he's got a gravel driveway that's on a slope, and it rained really, really heavily overnight. And when we got up in the morning and looked at the driveway, there was a kind of a stream running down the driveway. kind of a gorge had been kind of carved into the gravel of his driveway, just because the water tends to keep going down the same track in the same way that our thoughts and our emotions keep going down the same track. And every time we think a particular thing or feel a particular thing, we dig that groove deeper. So that's what we find when we begin to pay attention to our mind, that it tends to run along similar kind of grooves. Another way you can put this is that the mind reacts. There's a stimulus and then there's a reaction. So it's as if the way that our mind functions is determined by what stimulated it. A really good illustration of this is predictive texting. So if you've got predictive texting on your phone, even actually Google Mail does this now. It predicts what you're going to say next. And it's always easier to say what you've said before than it is to say something new, because it's just easier. You know, you can just press the button on your phone and it just automatically fills in the text message with the thing that you're in the habit of saying. So it's not necessarily going to be the best thing to say, it's just the easiest thing to say. So what we find then is that habit is a force. It empowers us to act in a similar way to the way we've acted before. So we've even got that expression in English, don't we? We talk about the force of habit. So this is one way that the mind can function, but it can also function in a creative way. Something new can emerge from what's set it in motion. There can be freedom, there can be spontaneity, which is the direction that we're trying to move in. So yeah, so the mind, we've got this one mind, and it can function in two ways. So bear with me a moment. So yeah, so the mind can function in two ways. It can function in a reactive way, where we just carry on in the way that we've carried on before. The mind is like predictive texting, or like the water running down that rut in a gravel driveway. Or we can be creative. So something new can emerge from what stimulated our mind, ourself. So what Buddhism is really about is moving from the one to the other. So I just want to talk a little bit more about the mind and how it can function in a reactive way and how it can function in a creative way, and what some of the characteristics of a reactive mind are and what some of the characteristics of the creative mind are. So in terms of the reactive mind, like I've been saying, the mind, when it's reactive, it's reactive. So it's as if what stimulates the mind conditions the particular quality of the mind. It's also mechanical. There's a sense of predictability, a sense of automatic or automatedness. You know, we sometimes feel that when, as we say, people press our buttons. So if someone does something that we really don't like, we kind of get wound up in a particular kind of way, and then we might say something that they don't like. So particularly at the moment in this kind of lockdown, you might have noticed this, particularly with the people that you live with, maybe, that because of the intensity of being stuck with people, those reactive patterns between us and somebody else are kind of set in motion more vigorously. We might notice how the effect of that afterwards on our own mind. We keep running over particular scenarios in our mind, in terms of, we talk about interpersonal dynamics, and that's an example often of a reactive pattern, both within one's own mind, but also in relationship or in communication with somebody else. So the reactive mind also tends to be repetitive. You just get the sense of going through the motions of things happening before, of a sense of stuckness. So often the phrase that you hear is, oh God, here we go again. Here we go again. That's how you feel, and that's sometimes the way that you might talk to yourself about it. So that one of the key characteristics of the reactive mind is it's unaware. There's a lack of awareness. It's sometimes spoken of in the tradition as being like somebody who's in a state of drunkenness, that they don't really quite know what they're doing. They're doing things all right. They're banging into things. They might be offending people, but they don't quite know what they're doing. So yeah, being unmindful is a little bit like that. So the characteristics of the creative mind are the opposite. So the creative mind is not dependent on the stimulus that set it in motion. So it's active on its own account, and it's spontaneous. This is one of the wonderful things about the creative mind. Just a very small little example of that, of this kind of thing. When I first started to learn to meditate, I was doing a practice that we're going to learn next week. It's called Metta Bhavana. It's about developing a more empathic attitude towards other people. And I was driving my car, as you do, in Wellington in New Zealand. And I remember it really vividly. I was driving along and somebody pulled out in front of me, as people are apt to do. And I, instead of swearing at the person, which I would normally do, cursing them or whatever, I just waved at them. It sounds like a small thing, but I was really shocked at the time because I didn't think about it. That was just the response that came out of my body, as it were, was just a wave rather than a curse. And I realized that the reason that had happened was because of the meditation that I've been doing. So that's the kind of thing. It's quite a small example, and I'm not making any claims about my spiritual development, but it did actually seem to be coming from the meditation that I've been doing, that I was just a little bit more creative in response to something that could have been potentially a source of getting into a reactive mental state or a negative mental state. So the creative mind is also independent. In other words, it's not dependent on what sets it in motion. It's original, it's free. So one of the characteristics of the creative mind is productivity, that things come out of the creative mind. Now, one of the most obvious examples of that is people who are creative in the literal sense, so people who paint or make pieces of theatre or make films or music. But what's really important, I think, that we understand is that when we use that word creative, we're talking about it in a much broader sense, that we can all be creative in the sense that I'm talking about. We can all be, particularly, we'll notice that in the way that we are responsive to other people. Yeah, so that's one of the ways that we'll become more creative, is by the way that we respond to other people. So that's particularly helpful, I think, at this time when a lot of people are under a lot of pressure. Even though things have eased a little bit in terms of lockdown and we've been getting some magnificent weather, there's still that kind of pressure to respond creatively to other people. And when we have to respond, we can't just not respond. Being part of a human community is just part of being a human. So one of the key characteristics, what makes the creative mind, as opposed to the reactive mind, is awareness. So this is the key factor really in terms of developing a creative mind, is awareness. So really what Buddhist practice is about is moving from a reactive mind to a creative mind, and from a creative mind to an ever more creative mind. So I've presented it in kind of a binary way. There's this, there's a reactive and then there's the creative. But actually it's much kind of a deeper process in that it's like a continuum from a very, very reactive to a highly creative state. And the state of awakening that the Buddha inhabits is a state where there is only the creative mind, you could say. There's only this unimpeded creative outpouring. So the question then becomes, well, how do we make this transition? How do we make this transition from the reactive to the creative, and the creative to the more creative? And really, we've got the key to it already. Like I was saying, that one of the key characteristics of the reactive mind is unawareness, and one of the key characteristics of the creative mind is awareness. And we've learned how to cultivate awareness through mindfulness practice. So what we need to start doing if we want to make this transition is just start noticing what's happening. So that's what we've been doing. We've just been noticing what's happening, noticing what our body is doing, noticing what our mind is doing as we try and notice what our body's doing. I mean, that's what tends to happen as we try and become aware of our body. We just start noticing all the stuff that's going on in our mind. So if we can just start to notice that, if we can start to notice what's happening, we can just be, we can be a bit more responsive to what's going on, what's actually happening. Because we know what it is. If we don't know what's going on, we're not going to be able to respond creatively. It's sort of as simple as that. And also, when we're aware of what's going on, we can begin to create a space between the stimulus that comes at us and how we respond to that stimulus. So this is one of the key things that we're trying to do when we develop awareness is to create a bit of space, or to create a gap between the stimulus and the response to the stimulus. So this is really, really fundamental to the whole kind of Buddhist project, is loosening the reactive mind, the kind of knot of the reactive mind, by keeping on creating space between what comes to us, or what comes at us even in our life, and how we respond to that. Because the fact of the matter is that we can't not respond. Really, what we can do is just improve the quality of our responses, to develop the quality of our responses. And like I say, the key way of doing this is by keeping on coming back to direct experience, keeping on coming back to what's actually happening, and developing that spaciousness, developing that openness within our own mind and within our own experience. And we do that by coming back again and again to direct experience. So direct experience of the body in particular. That's where we're starting. That's where this process starts. That's the way the Buddha introduced the practice of mindfulness. He said you need to start by paying attention to the body and its movements. So that's just a bit by way of kind of outlining this really key concept, which we're going to keep coming back to in the course, of mind, reactive and creative, and moving from the one to the other. And like I said, a big part of that is becoming aware of the body. So what I wanted to do now is just talk a little bit about how to sit for meditation, basically. So how to have a comfortable body so that it's easier to give our attention to it, so that we feel relaxed and also energetic and upright, so that we can give our attention to what's going on in our mind. So if you just bear with me a moment, I'm just going to move the camera around, and I'm just going to set things up so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to demonstrate some different ways that you can sit for meditation. So just bear with me a moment. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay, so I'm sitting on the floor, as you can see, and basically what I've got here are some yoga blocks. I've got 4 of them. So it's really handy if you've got yoga blocks, but if you don't, you can use something similar. Like that's about the same size as a large book, like a large coffee table book or an old encyclopedia. You could also use like folded up blankets or folded up towels, even are quite good. You want something that's quite firm, yeah? So when you're sitting on the floor for meditation, you want something that's quite firm. So for that reason, pillows aren't quite so good, yeah? They're not, because they're a little bit too soft. And you basically just sit. This is the easiest way to sit. I'm going to demonstrate 3 different ways to sit. So this is the way that you can sit. So apologies, you can't see my head, but it's more important that you see my body right now. So the advantage of sitting like this, and most people can manage this, is that you don't need much flexibility in the hips. If you sit cross-legged, which I'll demonstrate in a moment, you need more flexibility in your hips. Yeah, so that's basically what you do. So I'm just going to turn to the side so you can see what's going on. So the whole reason for sitting on a height is the angle of the pelvis. So if I was to sit much lower, if I was to sit like that, see what happens to my back? It kind of curves like that. And if I want to sit upright, I'm going to need to pull my chest upwards and to lift up the back of my pelvis with the muscles on my back. And that becomes a bit painful after a period of time. Yeah. So that's why we sit on the height. We sit on the height so that we have so the pelvis is balanced, so that we don't need to use any muscular effort hold the pelvis there. I don't have to do anything with the large movement muscles on my body. They just stay there quite easily. Yeah. Now, you'll need to experiment a bit to get the height right. Most people, I've noticed, they tend to sit a bit too low. So you might want to just find something that you think is going to be comfortable and then raise it up a little bit. And it's all about trial and error. Yeah? So meditation posture is all about trying things out and see how you get on with it. The other thing that's quite nice to do is to have a blanket. So when you've got a blanket, and actually I'm just going to turn around to the front now. With a blanket, what you can do is you can open it out fully, like so. And you can just wrap it around your middle, like that. And then roll it down. So what that does is it creates a kind of a shelf that you can place your hands on. You see that? So what that means is I can release my arms completely, and I can rest my hands so that with my arms released, my chest can open. And also, it's not so much of an issue at the moment, but in the winter months, it keeps your legs warm as well. So that just creates a really, really comfortable meditation posture. You'll find that, well, some of you might find that it's hard on your knees or that it's hard on your ankles. So I'll just say a few things about that. And again, I'm just going to turn to the side. So let's wriggle over a little bit so you can see. So yeah, so sometimes you might find that your foot is kind of like that, yeah, that you don't have enough flexibility in your ankles. What I suggest you do is it's easy for me because what I can do, because I'm sitting on a meditation mat, I can just hang my feet off the back of the mat. But if you're not sitting on something like this, what you could do is fold up, like roll up a towel and put it under there, or a t-shirt or something, just to take the pressure off the ankles. Don't put the foot out to the side. You see what I'm doing there? Make sure that it's pointing straight backwards. So you want your foot and your lower leg to be all in a line, because if you put your foot out to the side, you'll put a twist in your knee. So whatever way you sit for meditation, make sure that your knees are comfortable. Yeah, so don't put up with any pain in your knees, because your knees are actually quite a sensitive joint, and if you mess them up, it makes life really, really difficult for you. So that's the first way of sitting, sitting so-called in a straddling posture. And what I'll do now is I'll just demonstrate how to sit cross-legged. So you probably need a little bit less height if you sit cross-legged, generally speaking. Most of the things I'm saying are kind of generally true. It depends on the person. It depends on the particular body shape that you have, and the flexibility of your joints and so on. So to sit cross-legged, I've got a lovely meditation cushion, but again, you can improvise. You can actually sit on something quite hard. Like you could even sit on a block of wood once you've got something soft on top, so it's not too hard on your bottom. To sit cross-legged, now you just basically sit like this. Now we tend to say cross-legged, but you're not literally cross-legged. If you were cross-legged, you'd be sitting like that. I'm just going to move the camera down so you can see me a bit better. So yeah, if you were sitting cross-legged, you'd actually be sitting like that. But if you sit in that kind of way, what you'll find is the lower leg will be squashed by your upper leg, yeah, and you'll get pins and needles probably in that foot there. So what you need to do really, it's more that you've got one leg in front of the other leg. It's something more like that. Yeah? So you'll notice that there's actually quite a bit of my body on the ground. There's my bum's on the ground, and then the sides of my leg is on the ground. And what you'll find is that you need to be careful of your knees again. So what you might find is one of your knees comes up like that. You might not have the flexibility in your hips. So it's a good idea just to put something underneath your knee so that it's touching something, so that it's not floating. And again, the same principle applies for the height of your pelvis. Yeah. So see that my pelvis is balanced. If I was just to sit on one, my whole body would kind of collapse. So again, you need to experiment with the height of your support. And again, if you want to, you can place a blanket around you. I'm not going to demonstrate that because I've already demonstrated that, and it's quite straightforward. So you can place your hands on the blanket, or you can place your hands on your knees, whichever feels most appropriate. And I'm just going to make one comment about sitting on a chair. So you don't have to sit on the floor to meditate. You can meditate. You can meditate quite effectively sitting on a chair, and particularly if you've got issues with your knees or your body, sitting on the floor might not be possible for you. But I just want to reassure you that you can meditate perfectly effectively on a chair. So don't get hung up about needing to sit on the floor. Yeah. So yeah, a couple of words about sitting on a chair. So in terms of sitting on a chair, the main thing is that I'm just going to move out a little bit. So in terms of sitting on a chair, what you want to do is you want to place something. So the angle of the seat is important, because the angle of the seat will transfer into the way that the angle of your pelvis. So what you can do is you can place. I'm just going to place a yoga block under each of the legs of the chair. And what that does, it puts a bit of a tilt in the chair. I'm actually going to do it even more so you can see what I'm talking about. You see that? There's a tilt in the chair. So I'll just show you what I've done. I've just placed something under the back of the chair. And then when I sit down, my pelvis is nice and upright. So you want to sit in a chair so that you're not sort of slouching back against it. Ideally, you sit so that your back is free of the backrest. So you're just sitting there quite kind of four square on the chair with both of your feet on the ground. So if your feet don't quite touch the ground, you might want to put something underneath your feet to lift them off the ground, so that your feet, to lift the ground off the ground, as it were, so that your feet have got something to rest on. So that's just, and then again, you can rest your hands in your lap, or you can rest them on your legs. So yeah, I'll make that video available after the class. So this is being recorded, so you can have another look at this later. You might have a bit more time to experiment, or you might be at home experimenting at the moment. I can't see you, but I imagine some of you are having a go at trying to set yourself up. And again, just to remind you that a lot of it is trial and error. Yeah. So when you're setting yourself up for meditation, it's just about trial and error. So trying something, seeing if it works. If it doesn't work, trying something a little bit different, and just getting something that is going to work for you in the long term. So what we'll do now is I'll just give you a bit of time just to set yourself up for meditation, and we'll do a little bit of it. Yeah. So we'll just have a break now. I'll set the camera up in the way that it was, and I'll give you a couple of minutes just to get yourself straightened out at home with your meditation posture. And just to reassure you again, if you're sitting on a chair and you're happy sitting in a chair, then by all means sit in a chair. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to do a short meditation, and it's just really a meditation on what's happening in your experience. So if you just want to, just relax into your posture. And if you haven't got everything perfectly right, don't worry about it. We're not going to be here very long. You can continue to experiment in the break if you wish. So just settling on a particular way of sitting and deciding to remain in that posture for the next while. First of all, just getting a sense of your surroundings. So getting a sense of what's around your body. A sense of the room that you're in. And noticing sound as well. So don't worry so much about what's producing the sound that you can hear, but just noticing the existence of it, the fact of it. And then beginning to tune into your body. So allowing an awareness of the body to emerge from within the body. So feeling the contact that you're making with the floor. So your feet and maybe your legs as well. Your pelvis and your buttocks touching what you're sitting on, your chair or your cushions. So actually feeling the weight of your body pressing down onto the floor. Feeling your skin in contact with your clothing. So the clothing over your legs, around your pelvis, the lower belly. Maybe you can feel your belt pressing against your belly, your belt or your waistband. It's as if you're pouring awareness like liquid into a jar. So you're filling your body with awareness. So the lower belly, the waist, the lower back, the pelvis filled with awareness. Noticing the way the breath moves in that part of the body. Notice the movement of your skin against your clothing. In the middle part of the trunk, so around the base of the rib cage, the front, the sides, and the back. The chest, the shoulders, the shoulder blades. So feeling that whole upper part of your body, breathing in and out. Your arms resting by your sides. Again, skin touching clothing, and feeling the touch of your hands on whatever it is that they're resting on. the right hand and the left hand, the right arm and the left arm, and the neck and the throat, emerging from the torso, a continuation of the spine. And then notice how it is that you're holding your head on your neck. Feeling the scalp underneath your hair spread over the skull, allowing the forehead spread, the eyes rest back in their sockets. Just letting the face be soft, letting the jaw be soft. So that you don't need to hold a facial expression to meditate. You can just let your face, your whole face, be soft. And getting a sense now of the whole of your body, with all its different sensations, with all its different parts. And noticing the atmosphere of the mind. So the mind arises with the body. And what's the atmosphere? What's the mood of your mind? Do you feel kind of tight, constricted, or frustrated? Or do you feel open, expansive, and relaxed? Is your mind kind of obsessive or preoccupied with something in the past or in the future? Or is it just a smoothness and an ease, a pliability of thought? Are you able to be here with what's happening in your body? Or is there a constant pull towards something else? Like an image or a thought or a person or an experience that's not related to what's going on right now. So having had a sense of the mood of your mind, the atmosphere of your mind, what thoughts are arising in it? So what's the content, so to speak, of the mind? What images are present? What thoughts or trains of thought? Is it rapid? Is the thinking slow? Is what you're thinking about painful, or is what you're thinking about pleasant, or is it just a kind of neutral continuation of this or that? So having tuned in to our surroundings, our body, our emotions, and our thoughts, just tuning in now to our breathing. Notice what your body does as you breathe. So particularly noticing what your body does in the abdomen and the belly. How does the body move? What's the rhythm of your in-breath and your out-breath? And now let go of directing your attention in a particular way and just be with the whole of your experience. So just sitting. And now just bring the practice to a close. Okay, so we're going to have a break now. So you might like in the break to just experiment with your meditation posture a bit. So we're going to be meditating again later. We're going to do a period of mindfulness of breathing. So you might like to, just have a little bit of a tinker around with it. See if you can experiment in such a way that you're more comfortable. You'll know now whether or not the posture that you've assumed for your practice is going to work for you or not. So it's a matter of trying different things. And like I was saying earlier, do please text me questions. I've got a couple of questions already, which is great. So, if there's anything that arose in your home practice, clarification on something that I've mentioned, any questions about something unfamiliar that arose in your meditation, or potential applications of some of the principles that I've been talking about, any of that, just text me in the chat box, and I'll do my best to respond to them after the break. So, right. So, do you think 5 nights a week is often enough for the meditation? So, it's enough, I think, if you meditate 5 or 6 times a week, it's enough to feel the effect of it. But if you do more of it, you'll get more of an effect. So, at the moment, if you might have a bit more time than normal, but you can meditate as much as you want. You can meditate in the morning and again in the evening. So, I wouldn't want to kind of put a limit on it. Basically what I'm trying to do is just give you something that everybody can manage. But if you can do more than that, by all means do more than that, because you will notice the effect of it. So I think it's often enough to feel an effect. But if you want to do more, by all means do more. You'll go deeper with it if you do. And then someone says, sitting in Padmasana is firstly a little bit painful in Vipassana meditation. So sitting in Padmasana is when you have one foot on one thigh and the other foot on the other thigh. It's a little bit the way the Buddha's sitting behind me. That's Padmasana. So to sit like that, you need really flexible hips, basically. So most of us, particularly Westerners, aren't used to sitting on the floor. So most of us can't manage that. So, but if you can, even if you can, actually, I know people who can sit in Padmasana but don't for meditation, because there's not as much ease when you're meditating. Someone's saying, I find my back gets sore after a few minutes meditating. Is it okay to rest my back against a wall? I think you could definitely experiment with that. One thing I would say, that if your back is getting sore, it might be good that you're sitting too low. That's often the cause of a sore back, or you're sort of slouching. So if you sit on, have a bit more height underneath your bottom, you might find that your back doesn't get sore. But that's one thing you can definitely experiment with. Someone's saying, lately when I try to meditate in the afternoon, I struggle not to fall asleep. I wouldn't say that I am particularly tired physically. I try to open my eyes, but that doesn't always help. I just become constantly aware that I am losing awareness, not because I am thinking, but because I'm falling asleep. Would you have some advice for me, as I would like to keep on an afternoon practice on top of the morning one? Yeah, so it does seem that the afternoon, it can be a difficult time to practice, like our energy is a little bit low. So one thing you might like to think about, a few things. One is about just noticing what you're eating and when you're eating. So if you meditate after eating, often you'll find that your energy kind of gets a bit heavy and you'll get a bit sleepy. So that's one thing. Also, just in terms of moving your body around. So if you're really kind of, if you're quite, either if you're really, really busy or if you're quite sort of still, that'll affect the energy in your body in the afternoons. One thing you can do as well as opening your eyes is just try and keep your body upright. But it's in a way, it's notorious in meditation circles, that time of the, and particularly late afternoon is notorious for nodding. I'll say a little bit more about this on the 4th week of the course, about how to work with those obstacles, particularly the one of nodding. So I just say, yeah, just food and sleeping and just generally just energy in the body, just to work with that and just experiment with that a little bit. You could even have a cup of tea or coffee, if that might sort of perk you up a little bit. It can also perk you up a little bit too much, obviously. So it's just, again, trial and error. Can you recommend a book related to this course that's easy to understand, please? So I sent an email about a week ago, which had a number of different book recommendations on it. So if you didn't get that, email me and I'll send it to you. But basically, there's a publishing house called Windhorse Publications, and they're the publishing house of this particular Buddhist community. So any of their books will be very much in keeping with the kind of approach that we take here. And they've actually got a whole lot of special offers on at the moment for the COVID-19 lockdown. Like, they're offering books. They're actually offering a free ebook every week. And they've also got some books which are heavily discounted. There's one which would actually be really good. It's called The Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path, by someone called Sangharakshita. It's a fantastic introduction to the Buddhist path, and that would be very much in keeping with the kind of way that I've been talking on this course. One more question. Is it just practice of being aware that I need to develop, as it can be very aware of breathing and counts for maybe 2 stages, only to find then that I seem to fall asleep in last or second last stage? I think I am mixing up relaxation with meditation a bit in my body. So yeah, so that's a really interesting question. So when we meditate, we're not just trying to relax, we're trying to, in a way, wake up. So ideally what happens is when you get absorbed in meditation, there's both a deep sense of kind of ease and relaxation and peace that comes in the body, and an alertness. So it might be that you just need to keep things a bit brighter. Keep trying to keep the awareness of the breathing quite sort of sharp and quite clear. And keep the body open, keep the body upright. It might also be often issues to do with nodding or getting sleepy in meditation is just due to the fact that we're tired. So a lot of us don't get enough sleep. So that's another thing to look out for. If you were sitting here with me in the centre, I'd sort of check in with you about the questions, the answers to the questions kind of hit the spot. But because we're on this format, it's not quite so easy to do that. So I just hope that those questions are adequate. If they're not, you can ask me questions again at the end. Or if anyone's got any other questions, you can stick around at the end. I'll be here for 10 minutes or so after the class finishes. So we better move on. So what I want to talk about is preparation. So preparation, whatever we're trying to do, whether it's mending our car or cooking a meal, we need to prepare. So preparation, what we're doing is we're getting things ready practically, but preparation is also about orientating ourselves to a future activity that we're going to be engaging in. So it's a little bit like, I've been doing a little bit more baking than I normally would. In fact, I hardly ever bake, but I've just been baking cakes and things over the last few weeks while I've been in lockdown. And it takes a little bit of planning, particularly because you don't want to be popping on down to the supermarket because the queues are big and so on. So you have to think about it a bit and what you need. And so that's part of it is thinking about all the different ingredients you're going to need and making sure you've got baking parchment or whatever else. And there's also like imagining what's going to happen. So part of imagining what's going to happen is creating a space in your day to make the cake. So I've discovered it takes about 2 hours to make a cake from the beginning to the end, to let it cool and all the rest of it. So you need to create a space. So in terms of meditation, it's the same. I mean, you need to first of all just think practically about, and one of the things we've talked about tonight is sitting for meditation. So making sure that you've got what you need to sit for meditation, making sure that you've got your questions and whatever else. And you've also created a space in your day, like you've got a particular time that you do it. If you don't create that space, then you'll get distracted by other things that'll sort of bother you. If you haven't actually made a decision to do that particular activity, meditation, in that particular time, you'll get distracted by all the other things that you need to do. So it's really important to clear a space. I find when I'm baking or when I'm cooking generally that I need to have the kitchen relatively clear. If there's lots of clutter, it makes it harder to concentrate on what I'm doing. It's not as satisfying. So I think meditation's a little bit like that. It's good to clear a space. So particularly when you're doing it online, like we're doing tonight, maybe to clear your desk, to shut down other programs on your computer, just so you're not to turn your phone off, just so you're not going to be distracted by different bits and pieces. You can just give yourself wholeheartedly to the practice. So that's in a way preparation before you sit down to meditate. Now, after you sit down, we also need to prepare. And what we're doing is we're just really noticing what's happening. We're getting a sense of what's going on. We're developing awareness of all the different aspects of our experience, so that when we become to pay attention to our breathing, it's as if more of ourself is there, more of ourself is present. So what I want to introduce you to is just a way that you can prepare. And I've been doing this all the way through when we've been meditating. I've been doing something like this, and I'm just gonna share a little kind of just 4 different aspects of your experience that you can tune into before you meditate. So hopefully you can see that on your screen. So yeah, so when we sit down to meditate, before we enter into the mindfulness of breathing, it's a good idea to begin with just to tune into our surroundings. So just getting a sense of where we are, what's around our body, the space that we're in, and also a really key aspect of our surroundings are sounds. So noticing sounds and just allowing them to kind of be there. If there's an annoying sound, that just letting it kind of be there, just accepting that the sound, that living in the city particularly, sound is just an ever-present experience. We just need to meditate with that. It doesn't need to be a problem. So just acknowledging the fact of sound. And then we can acknowledge, in a way, the fact of our body. So we can begin to tune into our body. We can tune into the parts of our body that feel good, maybe the parts of our body that don't feel good. So part of tuning into our body is just noticing that it's there and feeling the contact of our body with what we're sitting on, feeling the contact of our body with our clothing, and feeling the sensations that arise in the body, sensations of touch, sensations of warmth, sensations that are pleasurable, sensations that aren't pleasurable. And just really tuning in to our body as a mass of sensation. And by the time we've done that, and the way we've been doing that, it's actually just scanning through the body, just moving either from the head down into the body or from the feet up to the body. There's different ways you can do it, but basically you're just tuning into the different parts, and eventually you kind of build up a sense of the whole of your body, and then arising within the body, or together with the body, as it were, is what we call the mind. So that, generally, or roughly speaking, you can say that consists of emotions, which is how we feel in ourselves, the kind of particular atmosphere of the mind. So as I said before the break, when we did that meditation, does it feel kind of contracted? Does it feel expansive? Does it feel kind of really busy, or does it feel quite still? Just noticing the kind of overall emotional tone, the overall atmosphere of the mind. We'll go into a little bit more detail in the next couple of weeks about being a bit more precise about identifying some of the different qualities of the mind. But for now, it's just getting a basic sense, in the same way that when you open the curtains in the morning, you get a sense of whether it's a fine day or whether it's a cloudy day or whether it's bucketing out the heavens. You just notice what's happening. And then also noticing our thinking. So notice what's going on in terms of our thoughts. Just notice that stream and trying to recognize that it is a stream, that there's nothing fixed there, that it's just flowing on. And we can just allow it to do that as we begin to give our attention to our breathing. So what you notice is what's happening is we're kind of moving from a breadth of awareness, so having a sense of all the different aspects that are going on, to a more focused awareness. So within that breadth of awareness, we give our attention to our breathing. So we become a bit more focused. We choose to single out that one experience to be our focus for the duration of the mindfulness of breathing. It's a little bit like if you listen to a song on the radio, there'll be all the different aspects of the song. There'll be the drums and the piano and the bass and the guitar and the backing vocals, and that's all there in the background. In the foreground is the singer and the song. So it's a little bit like that when we meditate. It's like all these things, our surroundings, our body, our emotions, our thoughts, that's all kind of going on in the background. The focus, though, is our breathing. In the same way that with the song, the focus is the singer and the words and the music of the song. So yeah, so that's basically just a few words about preparation. So there's one other really important element of preparation, and that is what we could call inspiration. So we need to connect with our inspiration for the practice. We need to connect with a conviction that it's possible for us to develop through practicing meditation. And this is another force that counters habit. So I was talking earlier about the reactive mind and how it's driven by habit. And inspiration, in a way, draws us out of habit. It shows us that there's another possibility for us. It's a little bit like the fourth sight that the Buddha saw. When he saw old age, sickness, and death, he also saw the wandering holy person. And that gave him a conviction that he could do that too. So what we need to find is some kind of image or thought or reflection or object that reminds us of that gives us a conviction that we can, through this practice, develop and grow. That's why we have the shrine. That's why we have the shrine here in the Buddhist Centre. It helps to remind us that the Buddha isn't just the teacher and the founder of the tradition that we're practicing. We might feel grateful to him and so on, but the Buddha also represents the possibility of awakening, of human awakening that we ourselves can move towards through developing a more creative mind, through developing awareness. So yeah, the Buddha is made of the same stuff that we're made from. So if we can develop that kind of conviction, we will engage with the practice. We'll want to do it. We'll kind of galvanize our enthusiasm for it. So it's probably worth pointing out that, like, if you're new to Buddhism, the Buddha might seem really distant. So we might need to bring this kind of closer to home a bit. We might need to think about, qualities that we admire in people that we know. Qualities like, generosity or kindness or courage or resilience or strength. Maybe it's honesty or integrity. Maybe it's the ability to create beauty, or maybe it's wisdom. So those are all qualities that we'll develop if we develop a creative mind through the practice of mindfulness. So if we can think of a person, or again, a memory of meeting somebody, or a poem, or, like I say, an image of somebody, that can help remind us what it is that's important to us and give us a conviction that if we practice, we can move towards it. So I just want to read you a little poem, which I find reminds me of the potential that we all have as human beings. Hopefully, it's by a Swedish poet called Thomas Tranströmer, and I just want to read it to you. It's called Roman Arches. Hopefully something of the meaning of it will come across to you. So Roman Arches by Thomas Tranströmer. Inside the mighty Roman church, the tourists stood crowded in the half-dark. Arch extended behind arch and no overview. A few candle flames flickered. An angel without a face embraced me and whispered through the entire body, "Do not be ashamed because you are human. Be proud. Inside you, arch behind arch opens infinitely. You will never be completed, and it is as it should be. I was blinded by tears and led out into the sun-gazing piazza together with Mr. and Mrs. Jones, Mr. Tanaka and Signora Sabatini, and inside them all, arch behind arch, opened infinitely. So that's just an example in a poem. You might like poems, you might not particularly respond, but it's just an example of something that might, just give you that sense of the conviction and the value of the practice. So you might like to bring an emblem of this into the place where you meditate. You might like to bring a symbol. So that's why we have the shrine. So that you might like to ask yourself, well, what would that be for you that would remind you of the value of meditation? That it's an open question for you to reflect on. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a period of mindfulness of breathing. So if you'd like to set yourself up for meditation, we'll make a start when you're ready. So first of all, just getting a sense of your surroundings. So you might like to close your eyes. So when we close our eyes, we simplify our experience. It makes it easier to attend when there's not so much going on. So when we close our eyes, we get a feeling for what's around us, a sense of our surroundings. Included in that is a sense of sounds. And then we get a sense of what's going on within our surroundings, which is our body. So our body takes up space. So actually feeling the space that our whole body takes up, feeling how some bits of our body are higher than other bits. Some bits are to the left, some bits are to the right. Feeling the contact of our body with what we're sitting on, so what our body is resting on. So our feet and our legs, our pelvis and buttocks. Skin touching clothing. The firmness of the bones within our legs. The softness of the flesh. The touch of our clothes on our skin. Being aware of the pelvis, the lower abdomen, the genitals. Maybe we can feel the press of our belly against our waistband or belt. Our belly, our waist, our lower back. The chest, the armpits, the upper back, the shoulders. So just getting a sense of the whole of our torso filled with awareness. Our arms and our hands. So feeling our body from within our body. So it's not that we're looking at it from outside, we're feeling it from the inside. Aware of it from the inside. In the neck and the throat. The scalp, the forehead, the face. The eyes, the jaw, the mouth. Feeling the tongue warm and wet within the mouth, within the head. Then just having a sense of the whole of your body with all its different parts or all its different sensations. And feeling the mood of our mind, of our heart, our emotional experience. So don't worry if it's hard to get a hold of anything. It's more the questioning, the curiosity that's important. A desire to know and to feel and to see what's going on, what's happening. Noticing your thinking as well, what's happening in terms of thought. So having been curious about our surroundings, about our body, about our emotions, and about our thoughts, now becoming curious about what our body does as we breathe. So what's going on? How does it feel? Giving our attention to that. And choosing to make that our focus for the next period of time. So remembering that the basic gist of the practice is that we pay attention to our breathing and try and deepen that attention. If we notice that we're not paying attention to our breathing anymore, just start paying attention to our breathing again. Just in a patient, kindly, insistent kind of a way. And in the first stage of the practice, we're going to place a count at the end of the out breath. So we breathe in and out in our natural rhythm, say 1. Breathe in and out in our natural rhythm, say 2. In and out, 3, and so on, until we've counted 10 whole cycles of breath. Not worrying too much if we don't get to 10, if we get distracted, just coming back to our breathing and starting again at 1. So moving into the first stage of the mindfulness of breathing. And the second stage, placing the count just before the in-breath. So we say 1, we breathe in and out in our natural rhythm. 2, and so on. Remembering that the practice is about the breathing, not about the counting. The counting is just a support to our awareness of the breathing in our body. So moving into the third stage now, letting go of the counting and just being with your breathing. Moving now into the fourth stage. So letting go of the counting and just bring our attention to where we first feel the breath entering the body. And now let go of directing your attention to your breathing and just sit. So you're just sitting without any particular focus. Simply open and relaxed. And then just bring the meditation to a conclusion. You can open your eyes when you're ready. So as well as the preparation, there's something that we do just after the meditation, after the four stages of the mindfulness of breathing that you might have noticed is we just have a period of just sitting. So what this means is that when we've been doing the mindfulness of breathing, we've been directing our attention to our breathing. And when our mind wanders off, we've been redirecting it. So when we just sit, we don't do that anymore. We just relax that kind of sense of trying to do something in a particular way. So we're just open, we're just relaxed. We just let awareness continue without trying to make it continue, as it were. So we don't try and make an effort. We don't try not to make an effort. We just sit. So it's quite an important part of the practice. It kind of brings it into balance. Now, as you begin to meditate for longer, you'll find that aspect of meditation becomes more important. But for now, it's just something that it's really worth doing just at the end of the meditation. Yeah, so just spending a few moments, a minute or two, just sitting. If you find that you're enjoying yourself and you've got the time, you can just sit on. You can sit on for as long as you like, and that's actually a really, really valuable thing to do, to just sit and do nothing, as it were. So I want to move on to practicing, setting up a practice at home. So there's two things for this week. So there's the mindfulness of breathing every day, and and this week when we do it, try and pay attention to the preparation and the just sitting at the end. If you listen to the lead through, so it's there, it's on there. But just try and pay a little bit more attention to it. And you might like to pay a bit more attention to what you do before you sit down to meditate. So it's quite good to just do something that's quite simple and almost sort of meditative before you meditate, and then you'll notice that you'll already be more attentive, as opposed to doing something really busy and complicated, like sending off 5 or 6 emails or something like that. Yeah, and then at the end, just sitting. Yeah, just spending a bit of time just sitting. So the other thing for this week is reducing input. So I talked earlier about about what we're trying to do to move from a reactive state of mind to a creative state of mind is creating space. And for a lot of us these days, we don't have a lot of space, particularly kind of mental space, because every time a space opens up in our day, we pick up our phone or something and we put some stimulation into our mind. We turn the radio on, we pick up a newspaper. So we don't really get a lot of space just to be with what's going on, because we keep putting more stuff in, as it were. And that makes us agitated. It gives us kind of indigestion. We can't possibly digest all the different streams of stimulation that are coming into our mind. So a really, really good way of creating space and thereby moving into a more creative kind of state is by reducing input. So what I'd invite you to do this week is to think of 2 ways you can reduce input in your life. A lot of it's going to be to do with screens, with smartphones in particular. So you might decide one really good way of limiting input is turning off notifications on your smartphone. I remember when I first did this, it made a huge difference. Delete apps that you don't use. Decide to turn the radio off at a certain time. Put away reading material, so there's not reading material all over the kitchen table. And you might like to just do nothing for a bit. Yeah, so just spend a bit of time during the day just actually doing nothing. So there's some more ideas in the notes there, but it's just, so think of 2 ways that you can reduce input this week. That's your homework. So yeah, so mindfulness of breathing each day, paying particular attention to preparation and just sitting, as what I was talking about earlier, and then 2 ways that you can reduce input. And like I say, some of it's going to be about how you use your smartphone. You might like to even just turn it off after a certain time in the evening and not look at it. There's a lot more that could be said about that, but I have to leave it there for now because we've run out of time. You also might like to just reflect on what you find inspiring and bring something to make a little, as it were, shrine for your meditation posture. And try and remember to keep up the mindful hand washing. If you find that you're really getting into that, you might like to include other activities. So when you have your cup of tea, or when you're eating your breakfast, or when you're folding your clothes, or getting dressed, or having a shower, you might like to include that as part of your daily mindful activities. And just remember, it's okay if it's messy. It doesn't all have to be all nice and neat and tidy and perfect. It probably won't be. So just let your practice be a little bit messy. And just to remind you that, we're doing this course for free, as we are all of our courses and classes at the moment. So if you would like to would like to ask you to consider making a donation. It's up to you if you want to, but we'd just like to ask you to consider that. If you've got other questions about anything that I've talked about so far, do hang around at the end, and I'll see if I can respond to them then. So other than that, I'll see you later on. I'll send you an email with the video probably tomorrow if you want to catch up with it or listen to some of it again, or it's mainly for the people who aren't here, but you might like to, follow the meditations, for example, or whatever you like. But that'll be coming to you on an email in the next day or so. So yeah, so I'll see you next week. All the best.